This episode is sponsored by The Alcohol Experiment, a free 30-day challenge designed to interrupt your patterns, give you control, restore your health, and put you back in touch with the version of you who doesn't need alcohol to cope, relax, or enjoy life. More than 220,000 people have already tried The Alcohol Experiment for themselves and have seen improved sleep, increased happiness, reduced anxiety, and so much more. Join thousands in this inspiring, hopeful, and exciting program where you examine your beliefs and reconnect with the best version of you without ever feeling like you're missing out. Start today for free at alcoholexperiment.com. Hi, this is Annie Grace, and this is This Naked Mind podcast. I'm here with Kristian. Welcome, Kristian. How are you?
I'm great, Annie. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So awesome. Why don't you dig in and sort of tell me your story? Where did it all begin for you?
I grew up in Australia, and I guess there's quite a big culture in drinking in Australia. But it was just a normal thing, right? So many of us, and it's in the family, and parents drink, and socials, you see it. And I guess for me, it started young. I'd go to parties. I had a sister that was 4 years older than me, and I'd like to hang around with some of those kids, and that kind of led from there. But it wasn't, I was still very much into sports. So I had this kind of, pushing really hard in rugby league versus, going out and doing those things. But I was also the youth against establishment type, and wanted to get away with as much as I could. And as I, further into teens and early adulthood, I did everything, worked hard, partied hard. And, I got into a snowboarding career, and, that was also very much down the drinking pathway at that time. It's very different to today's professionals. And even in, moving from there into the endurance sports culture, we train hard and stuff, but there's still a lot of drinking around in that. So yeah, grew up with it all and never really thought, and I don't know if I'd ever say that it was a massive problem, but there were things, that weren't always good that we all had, how many days are wasted from hangovers, all the negative stuff. But in, what am I, 44 now, when I was, 30, what was it, 36, 37, I got diagnosed with celiac. So, I liked my craft beers and stuff back then, and but that all went off the table. So the first thing is you find a gluten-free beer back then, and they were fine. I always liked wine and everything like that, but it didn't really, I didn't start questioning things until a friend of mine that's a very good strength and conditioning and coach and personal trainer in Australia. He wrote pretty harshly about alcohol, and always did. And I always have justifications why. I kind of agree with some of you, but not all of it. And then it went down to that, just questioning more and more things and seeing some negative aspects of it in myself, and going, questioning a bit more, until I decided, maybe I will take a break. And I don't think, everyone likes to say I'm a moderate drinker, and, what is moderate? In today's age, we could call moderate probably alcoholism. And I wouldn't, I didn't go out and, let me tell you, I had my fair share of parties and waking up hungover, or, not remembering things. But, in the last so many years, it was never like that. It was more like, hey, I'll have a few drinks and whatever. But then, you have that, and you're like, oh, was I an ass at that dinner? Or, did I not come across correctly? Or, regrets, I would say.
So, well, first of all, your comment about moderate, drinking, it's fascinating. So we've lived for so long under this dichotomy of like, okay, there's problem drinkers or alcoholics, and then there's all the rest of us, right? Like the whole, and like, this is this tiny little slice of people. And only real recently, I actually had an experience that was pretty cool recently, to be on a show with a doctor. And she was talking about alcohol use disorder and how the whole medical and scientific community has moved away from this idea of there's a fraction of people who are alcoholics and then all the rest are just fine. And she's like, now we use alcohol use disorder, which is really this spectrum, and it's 11 questions. And 2 of those questions, to your point, are, do you now drink more than you used to for the same effect, which is everybody I know? And do you ever have times where you regret drinking as much as you did? Which is, again, everybody I know. So even if we're like, I don't know a single person, even the lightest drinking people I know, who cannot answer yes to those 2 questions. And according to those 2 questions, just answering 2 affirmative questions in that list means you have mild alcohol use disorder. So I think you're totally right. Like this idea of, you know, I don't know, I just drink on occasion or whatever. I mean, that's fine. Everybody can do what they want to do, but it is interesting how much we use it as sort of a defense, right?
Well, I think, yeah, it is a defense, because you're right. We look at it and go, well, people that have, you know, alcoholism, they're on a 12-step program. That's not me. You know, that's not me. I drink enough, but I don't have a problem. And it's very easy to justify or convince ourselves that there's no problem. But even for myself, it was like, well, I would only drink, you know, 1 or 2 beers, you know, or have a glass of wine or whatever. There was a few times where I'd go a couple more than that, but you know, that after that second one, it just wasn't the same. But then still having, you know, waking up the next day not feeling great. And that, for me, being into, you know, fitness and doing the adventures I like to do, just was like, you're losing so much. And there's other things that we can get into, but yeah, it's like we have this idea that, hey, that's not me, this is me. And drinking a few beers a night, most nights of the week, is fine.
Yeah. So when you say you got into, and this is just pure curiosity, my mom actually lives in Australia half the year, and she's an avid skier, but she lives in Colorado half the year. And so from what I understand, there's not a lot of snowboarding in Australia. So how did you get into snowboarding?
Well, there is. It's you've got the Australian mountains. Not like, I live in Whistler, Canada now, so we're true mountains. Just like,
okay, but you can actually properly snowboard.
You can properly snowboard. So, you know, I was coming from a, you know, very focused, wanted to be a rugby league player, and, you know, politics and all this stuff got involved, and I was so over it. And as much as I love being a team player and love being in a team, I was just so sick of stuff being so far out of your control. And, you know, I always like skateboarding and stuff like that. And my stepbrother and I saw a video of snowboarding, and I was like, we've got to do that. And there was a local snowboard shop, and we got some information and then went down, you know, 5 hours south of Sydney, and went snowboarding for the first time. And it was like, I'm never missing a season of this. And that kind of morphed into going down there and then going on a trip over here. I think I went here when I was 17 the first time, and I went on a trip for 2 weeks. This is interesting on the drinking side of things. I went on a trip for 2 weeks to Whistler. I was 8, must have been 18 then, or just 18. And so you could drink in Australia, even though I'd doctored my license prior to then to be able to get into bars in Australia. In BC, in British Columbia, it's 19 as a legal drinking age. So I was here on a trip with the owner of a snowboard shop, and I think the next youngest person was 35. So, you know, every day finished at the bar, and I'm like, well, how do I do this? So I went into a local, and back then our licenses were like go-kart licenses. It was a laminated bit of paper, I guess, and with some help from the local snowboard store and young kids in there, we got an X-Acto knife and cut some numbers and turned them around and re-laminated, and there I got into the bars and was able to drink. So, and that, you know, the Australian snow led to, and then coming here, I was like, I've got to come, and then that led to back-to-back winters from, you know, for the next 7-8 years, between going to, you know, Australian resorts or New Zealand resorts, and then being in Canada, Colorado for a season. But yeah.
That's funny. I had so I worked at a photography shop in Aspen, and the woman who worked next to me, she was older than me. I think I was 17 or something, and she was older than me. And she's like, hey, we should go out to the bars or whatever. So since we were at the photo shop, we could like make photographic copies of the licenses. And of course, this was like in the I guess it would have been early 90s probably. And so it was like they were, not, there weren't all the holograms in it and all that sorts of stuff. So we just literally made a photographic copy of her license and I'd put it on the top of my license and then we could go out to the bar and then it would be fine. Except that one time I got pulled over and just for something silly, not for drinking, but just for something silly. And I went to give him my license and the cop saw that there was 2 IDs in my wallet. And he's like, what's that other ID? And I was like, oh man. And he's like, give it to me. And I just gave it to him. He just took it. He didn't say anything, but he just was like, I'm just going to keep this one. And I was like, oh shoot. But luckily I didn't get in trouble, but it was really, the ways.
Very hard to doctor a license these days.
Yeah, I know. And now everything's on social media too. So it's like a totally different world, right? That people are living in, because I'm certainly glad we have, young nieces. And I'm like, wow, if my entire life at that age was on social media, then that wouldn't have been very much fun,
I'm very happy that my youth wasn't on social media.
So, all right. So you're going back and forth, you're snowboarding, you're doing all of this sort of cool stuff. And when was kind of the moment that you started to think like, I don't know if drinking is all, like, this might be a problem or this might be an issue?
Literally not until last year.
Okay.
And it would ebb and flow. Like we got out of finished snowboarding up in 2002, and then we fell into endurance sports and Ironman triathlon, and my wife got very good very quickly and ended up going professional. And there was a big time of there where we were very focused on, and there's still very much the drinking culture. We trained together and did that. So we'd have drinks, but we wouldn't drink that much. And I can say, hand on my heart, we're one of those people that didn't drink that much then. And it would be lucky sometimes if it was a drink a week or whatever, but because we were so focused on the sport and everything like that. But that kind of ebbed and flowed. And, you'd have times of drinking more. I remember when she won her first Ironman outright as a professional, she drank so many drinks really quickly because she had to get up on stage and do a speech. So she used that as I'm so freaked out. She is an introvert. And that was really difficult for her. So her way of coping with that was but we met actually in Banff in Canada, even though she's English. And her and her friend could also drink very, very well back then, growing up in England, and their university culture as well. But, we kind of just fell out of that and then, gradually morphed back into it. She's always had I could take it or leave it attitude with alcohol, where I was a little bit more, I'd go out and have a drink with friends, or, we'd whatever, it'd be more like that. And it was like kind of post celiac, all things coming up and down. And then, coming here and being in, I started a run group, and we have a triathlon group, and we have all these things and socials. And our run group that we started, we would run Tuesday nights and finish so many of them with a social, and we'd get, pubs or, microbreweries on board, and they'd give a free beer or whatever. And it was great. But sometimes it'd go more than that. And it was really, so not last year, kind of the year that's gone, 2019 was when I was probably really thinking about it. And it was more and more, and just going, hey, I don't feel so good. Like, and just, even if it's one beer, I wake up and I feel like crap. And so I'd have these questions, but I'd also be like, but I really like it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't really until we went to, we've got a 10-year-old now that's big into mountain biking, and we went down in 2019 in October down to Virgin, Utah to watch Red Bull Rampage, which is like extreme skiing, but biking. And, we have Red Bull Joyride here, which is more the, freestyle jump stuff, where this is big mountain freestyle stuff in Virgin. And it was an amazing road trip. And it was on that road trip where, I was thinking about it. I bought a 6-pack of beer before I left and came back with 2 or 3 still there. And it was on that trip where I had 3 separate glasses of red wine, and I really liked my red wine. My dad was a massive fan, always had a big cellar full of good wine, and I enjoyed it. But there was, I had I had 1 glass, and I was like, this tastes horrible. It's like toxic. And I said to my wife, does this taste off, or, it's a good bottle? And she's like, no, it tastes great. And I'm like, it just doesn't taste right to me. So didn't have it, and I'd feel crappy after it. And that happened 2 more times, and I was like, that's it. I'm gonna go. That was, October. And I'm like, I'm gonna go to Christmas, and see how I go. The hard thing with going through the Christmas was all the major socials we had with the run group leading up to Christmas, or what I perceived would potentially be hard. But I'd made that decision, and I was like, you know what, I'll be fine with it. And I learned very quickly that I could go through a social and have no problem. I know so many people get stuck with, oh, my friends are going to bully me and this and that. I found none of that. I was just like, hey, I'm just not doing it. The funny thing is, so many people do the dry July or whatever you call it, and I've never been able to go 30 days in my life without and be like, yeah, what's the point? I feel like a beer. It's a nice sunny day. I've had a good bike ride or whatever. And I just didn't have to remove it from the house either. It was there. I think we even still have some in the fridge. I think a friend drank the other day, but we've still got wine sitting on our, on a shelf, but I didn't, and it just went, and it went to December. And I was like, it was okay. Well, kind of got to December. I'm gonna, I feel okay. I feel and we can get into some of the benefits that I saw, because a lot of people are like, oh, what's the changes? And I'm like, well, there wasn't that many, to be honest. But I think there's, so many stresses in life that it can mask so many different things. And I was like, well, I've got a 100K run race in California in April. So why don't I try, and I'll just go to April, and, then I'll see where I'll go. Well, COVID happened and the April race didn't happen. And lo and behold, here we are in 2021 and still haven't had a drink.
Wow, that's so awesome. That's amazing. So yeah, what are some of the benefits you feel in your own mind?
I think for me, I like to do something activity-wise every single day. So waking up and not wasting a day, or having, we have a young kid that's active and likes to do things, and I want to do things or get up early to do stuff. So just waking up not feeling great is not awesome, and I can have that enough anyway. Being a celiac, like if I got cross-contaminated or something's wrong, you can wake up feeling like crap, or have that, and I just kind of sick of that. So that was, having that was great, because you have more time to play, really, rather than being, you can't be a parent, I don't believe, or a good parent, and be stuck in bed with a hangover. It's just doesn't really work, or for the things that you do. But for me, I've struggled with sleeping for a very long time, and the biggest change and the best change is that I don't beat myself up for decisions I made 20 years ago. Like, why the hell does that pop up in your mind? You can't get to, like, you might be reading a book and doing the nodding donkey and falling asleep and being like, okay, I'm ready to sleep. Or you've slept and then woken up and you still got the book in your hands, and then you put that down, and then all of a sudden mind goes bing. Oh, let's have a thought about that decision you made, or that argument, or this or that, all those years ago. And that kind of disappeared, and is fantastic. That's like life-changing, that to not, physically, we are very hard on ourselves, but to, emotionally beat ourselves up every night on stuff that's so far in the past is a very big waste of energy, and it stops you sleeping. So that was one of the best, probably the best. Recovery is obviously quicker. The science, and you're into sports like I am, and I coach endurance sports. Recovery is hindered with alcohol. And one of the best things, like, still, I didn't even know today if I'll have another drink or not. Like, I never and I'm not like, hey, you must not drink or whatever. It's up to your own decision and stuff like that. And I still don't know. I did we've got some 2 doors up, our neighbors own a brewery here. They're awesome people. They have a great brewery. I re-spray painted a bike for their daughter, and they just gave me a big flat of beer. One of the local bike places here has bike wraps that you protect your bike with. And they did a collaboration. So they're called, wrap before your ride, and they got now beer after your ride, and it comes with a top tube wrap around. Anyway, they gave me a flat of beer, even though they don't know I don't drink. So I've just been passing that off to friends, as you know, as a giveaway, because I'm not going to try and stop my friends if they want to. I will give them crap if I see it, you know, affecting them negatively. I'm like, well, maybe think about this. Why don't you try this instead? You know, instead of you know, whinging the whole time that something's a problem, you know, try and fix it. But yeah, I'm not going to there and be like, hey, I've done it, so you must do it, and it's going to be better for the world. And it would be better. I think it's kind of crazy that it's probably the harshest drug in the world, but we focus on the war on something else, which makes it worse. But you know, alcohol is just one of those things that's allowed.
Yeah.
It's a tough one.
So I am curious, like in your own words, what do you think it was that it went from kind of not even making it 30 days to kind of making it then like, yeah, I don't even know if I'll drink again. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. It's just kind of irrelevant.
I think it was a couple things. So here on one hand, I got a guy that, you know, is very smart, that I've coached before, and he's coached me, and then I'd call a friend. Don't always agree with the stuff, but you know, it was like just the constant, you know, I'd read stuff and I'd just put this little, you know, just a little pin mark in your mind. And then actually one of my best friends in Australia, who I grew up, you know, in our late teenage years and early adult years, and we did a lot of partying together. Like we could come over to my place and we'd drink, you know, a case of throwdown beers, which is a smaller beer, and then go skateboarding and think nothing of it. And you know, he spent a lot of time over in Canada with us, and you know, so many trips. And you know, he's also a personal trainer, and he was the one that, you know, I think he wrote a post on something. So how you feeling Monday morning? You know, you've done all this work all week, and then you've just gone and undone all that good work from a couple of big nights, and now you feel like crap. So how's that working for you? And he was talking about, you know, that how he changed his relationship to a take it or leave it, based on your book. And that's where I saw it. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. So I guess I went into, I'd already started making this decision that I wasn't going to do it. And then in that time where I'm like, I'm going to go to Christmas, I read your book. And that was just kind of like, just destroying all the assumptions and myths and things we held on to dearly to keep its claws in us. And then it was just like, well, okay, there's no point. And the more you make, and I always say this to athletes, it's like, hey, we make decisions all the time, but intentions and decisions are nothing unless there's action, unless we're doing the doing part. So you can make a decision, but it's useless unless there's actually you make the committed decision and you act. So the act is, in this case, not doing. It's not opening the beer, or it's not. And for some people, they may need to remove themselves completely from that. So if you had to remove yourself completely from a friend group for a period of time, or going to the bar because you can't help yourself, or from doing that, for me, I kind of like a challenge. And I didn't look at it as like I was depriving myself, because the moment I think you look at it as depriving yourself, you set yourself up to fail. I was just like, what is the potential benefit of this? Is life going to get better? Is this going to be, you know, am I going to not beat myself up? Am I not going to be so angry? Am I not going to be, you know, am I going to recover, you know, waking up the next morning feeling great, awesome, I can win the day, instead of being like, ugh. So I don't, you know, for me, it was like, hey, I like to, things pop up, and if I see them multiple times, I'm like, okay, I've got to, you know, got to look down that path a little bit more. It's a little bit different to me. Hey, I want something, and then I'm going to see it all the time because it's just, you know, confirmational bias of me wanting the thing. But this other way, it's like, oh, this is here. I see this here. I see that there. Okay, I'm gonna do that. And it was funny. It was like what went from, you know, and it was the challenge. How is it going to be going through all these socials over Christmas, which is the drinking time? And it was like, fine. And then when COVID happened, it was like, thank God I'm not drinking.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, it was like, oh, there's enough stress as it is, like to add more of stress and more things, I don't think there were a lot of positives with, COVID times and the alcohol use. So for me, it was like, this is fine. And then it just kind of went on. And I'm not a person like, I know there's a lot of people, and if that's what they need, they count how many days, or some people, how many hours they've done since they stopped drinking. For me, it's like, yeah, cool. I'm nearly 18 months now. But it was like after the year, I was like, oh, whatever. And then it's just like, it seemed like those because you focus on it, and then you're like, oh, it takes so long to get there, when I didn't even need to be focusing on it. And now it's like, oh, there goes another 6 months. And I must say it is easier, because my wife always had, even though, we drank a lot together and then did this, and she's always had it now more of a take it or leave it. So when I stopped, she'd have, I think she had because she was doing a mountain bike mum's night, she had 1 or 2 drinks, and she never, after our kid, she didn't drink much at all. And now I think next month is a year for her since she's done it as well. And again, she's had so many chances and so many oh, that would be nice, but it's like, once that moment passes, it passes, and it's like no different. So and again, I still don't know. Will I have a beer again? I don't know.
Right.
Had plenty of opportunities. But what was awesome actually was a few months ago, I went out, couldn't really go out. There's no out here. But we had actually booked a cabin, on a lake with a few friends for a mate's 50th. So he didn't know, what was happening. He knew we were going somewhere, but, we went to the gun range and shot some shotguns at clay pigeons. And then we went there, and I was the only sober one there. So drinking whiskey and wine and whatever. So I cooked the dinner. I did that. We played poker and everything like that. And I had fun. And to the point of, I was belly laughing and crying as the only sober person in there. And that was just like, okay, solidified in my mind. You don't need it to have, fun or be social or whatever. And I know exactly the conversations I had. I know I wasn't being an ass. And I can sleep comfortably knowing that I wasn't an ass or, made a fool of myself or whatever, under the influence. So, and that to me is all positive.
Yeah.
More so than, having a drink. So it's, it was good.
Yeah, I feel the same way, with the laughing, it took a little while, I'd say, to sort of get that back. And I'd say back from the back I got it back from was when I was 10 or 12 or 8, when you were just kids and you just laugh uncontrollably to the point it would hurt. And there was a lot of laughing drinking, but it wasn't I don't know, it's just a different kind of laughing. It's not like that edge of your physical, can you even laugh any harder, because you might have to walk out of the room, or you're gonna pee your pants, or it was, the laughing that is consistently here post alcohol, and it gets more and more so, I'd say, every year that goes on, is just the best. It really is reigniting the child inside, and I think there's multiple things. I don't think it's just giving up alcohol. I think giving up alcohol is the thing that kind of allows you to then look very honestly at all the crap you've started to layer on and believe and tell yourself that isn't serving you anymore, and all these stories you have that are stressful, and start to unwind all of that stuff and get really back in touch with yourself. As you were saying earlier on, when one of the best benefits you've experienced is that you lay awake at night and you no longer beat yourself up. That sort of work, it's pretty easy to deal with the pain of consistently beating yourself up or having these really negative thought patterns or these awful stories that are keeping you really stuck if you're drinking, because you can numb it away, at least for a period of time. But when you're not drinking, you have to actually fix that stuff. You have to actually solve that stuff, because it is too painful. And so the emotions, the painful emotions that arise after you put down the numbing agent, are just all the guides and the signposts to say, hey, there's something here that needs addressed. There's something here that needs looked at. There's something here that needs worked through. And then I think the combination of those two things allow you to just live such a lighter life. Like life just doesn't feel so serious or so intense. It feels just, and then on the back of that is just hilarity, just really, really funny. My husband and I were doing like a video workout this morning. It was high intensity interval training. And like, we had to do speed skaters in our basement. And so we just started looking at each other and I could not stop laughing. There was nothing funny. I mean, except that we're just like doing speed skaters in a basement on carpet. And that was kind of funny, but I don't even know what came over me. And I was just hysterical and it was hilarious. It was probably his hair, but.
Well, it's interesting that like inhibitions drop and most people use that as an excuse to drink alcohol to have, those inhibitions drop. But yeah, it's funny, like the mental side of things, like if I look back, I look at how did I destroy a snowboard career, and it's because of the mental state of I suck, rather than being, and it was just, hey, had an injury, did this, do that. But then you start like, and I believe that like what you say to yourself is powerful. And that was it. But, looking at it and you just speaking like that brought that up. It's like, okay, but where did that mindset come from? Like in that time, I know that I was living in Canada and these things were happening and I was drinking. Yeah. So, you're just adding fuel to that fire, and that led away from, that career path. Now, I'm not unhappy about that because I'm quite happy we're full circle back in living in Whistler, Canada as permanent residents now, and in a completely, I hardly even snowboard anymore. I ski more. But I have we have a 10-year-old that probably we wouldn't have had that been the other way around, or life would have been different, and quite happy with where it's at. But it's good to now, I think if you unravel that and get a bit clearer, and being out away from alcohol allows your mind to be clearer, that you can start unraveling some of that stuff. And it can bring up other questions and beliefs and stuff like that, which aren't necessarily comfortable, but it's a way forward to be better as a person and better and happier where you are. So at this point, I haven't yet found a negative of not drinking.
Yeah. And I love that you hold it so loosely. I do the same. I'm like, I drink whatever I want, whenever I want. It's just been almost 7 years now since I wanted to drink. And I feel like holding it that loosely is important. I think it gets less important for me as the years go on, because I don't know, I just feel more sure that like, I don't even see why I would do that anymore. But I wouldn't, like, just as a rule, I'm never going to sit here and say I'm never going to have a drink again, because it's just kind of counter to that feeling of freedom of saying like, I'm going to trust myself to do what's right for me, and by the way, trusting myself after lots of work to learn how to trust myself. It wasn't like an instantaneous type deal. But I wanted to ask you specifically. So I've done, I love extreme sports as well. And I've done probably more of it, in before, having kids than now. But like one of the things that I did that was really fun is a few years in a row, we would do a sort of 180-mile relay run over 4 mountain passes. So it was from Idaho Springs in Colorado to Glenwood Springs in Colorado. And there was 10 of us, and we just like hand off the baton, sleep under the vans type deal. It was just really, really fun. And I remember getting to the end of the run, and I wasn't a big drinker at the time at all. But I remember getting to the end of the run, and it was all of these beer tents. And I'm just like, huh, that's interesting. And somebody said, oh yeah, it's good for replenishing whatever the carbohydrates and stuff. And then, I did a few marathons, and sure enough, at the end of every marathon, it was like, or half marathons, it was like beer tents. And I just wonder, like, what is this? And maybe it's just that alcohol is wrapped up in everything, but what is it with these super hyper endurance activities and alcohol?
I think it really, without going too molecular, like, we've been conditioned to that the two go hand in hand. Yep. And that you've had all this, for some people, when they say, oh, this, I've been so disciplined, I've trained like this, I'm just letting my hair down, yet they drink every week anyway, but it doesn't. But, you know, you have, and it gets to the finish, it's kind of this celebration and there's camaraderie and there's other people there. So, and the only way that we're being conditioned to have that camaraderie or whatever is to share a drink with someone. And, you know, I don't negative, like it, is it the best for recovery? No, absolutely not. But really in the day to day, yes, you've just finished your big event. Is it going to put it back? Yes, it's going to put it back a bit. It's not the best thing, but I see, you know, what could, you know, argued positives, but, you know, just that they get to let their hair down, and, you know, it's usually for most people, you don't really want to have that many drinks after you've done something like that. It's maybe the next night after if there's awards or whatever else. Good thing about most ultra races, the awards are the next day in the morning, so it's not you know, in terms of ultra marathons, in Ironman, it's a totally different ball game. But yeah, I think it all just comes down to the culture and what we're wrapped up in, and we haven't seen it another way. It's funny, even me, someone who doesn't drink, still was like, oh, it'd be great that we finish these runs and, you know, support the local community in the beer. Like it's like, I know the negatives, but I don't want to be this martyr about it and be like, hey, you must do this. Let's, you know, come to your own conclusion about that. And maybe if you're seeing that something's a problem, well, then you can speak up about it, or someone can make it clearer to you. But it's a tough one. I don't know how, you know, it's a systemic change, complete systemic change to change that and people's mindset surrounding it, because again, it's, you know, the most addictive drug that I think we have, but it's so far embedded into society that it's okay, even though you can just show the amount of negatives, but it's like water off a duck's back to people. Won't happen to me.
Yeah. It's just fascinating. And I think it's just so true. And it's not just with that sort of sports stuff, it's everywhere, but it just really is wrapped up. And I think that's what's so cool about people, you know, like you sharing your story and just showing up in those places and being the one laughing the loudest, is that we're all looking for another way with some part of ourselves. I think we're all like, you know, like we said in the very beginning, I haven't met a person who hasn't questioned their drinking at one time or another. And we just don't know there's another way. We think the two ways are, I'm going to be, you know, not drinking or moderating and miserable and feeling deprived. And moderating is basically like just constantly being on an alcohol diet, or I'm just going to do what I've always been doing, because there isn't a third way of actually feeling completely happy and at peace with it. So I really love that.
Yeah, I think it's also different for, like, you know, for me, again, I don't know why is it different, but why do some people struggle with, like, it's either, you know, struggle with, people are always like, oh, can you go cold turkey? Well, of course you can. It comes down to a decision. I know there's some, as you mentioned at the start, like the unconscious, conscious brain stuff, which is fascinating, and people need to understand a little bit more how that works. But again, it comes down to that, you know, making that committed decision and the actions, and each action you make strengthens a bond. So either way, positively or negatively. So, you know, yeah, I can beat myself up more when I continue saying I'm going to do this and then I don't do it. So I keep making that unfortunate choice and then you have to explore that area of why maybe we do that, which is uncomfortable, or you may need help. You know, many of us find it very difficult to ask for help. For me, I never got to the point where I was like, oh, I have a massive drinking problem. I never believed that. But I believed there was a problem. There were problems associated that was enough to elicit change or want to change, because I was like, oh, I don't like doing that. I don't like beating myself up. I don't like feeling crap the next morning. But it was more like, hey, as it got less and less and the same reactions were happening, it was like, you know, well, one beer is not even enjoyable because I get this problem. And I think, you know, going back to your question, like, when was it the time? If I'm honest, I think I let things slide before, and it got bad before it went up. So because I'd been like, hey, I'm celiac, I can only do this. And then someone's like, oh, well, our beer, we're not certified celiac, but we use an enzyme and you can do that. Okay, great. oh yeah, look, I didn't have any noticeable effects. Awesome. Oh damn, I really, really before celiac loved an IPA. I'm just gonna try it. And then all of a sudden you slide in this slippery slope of doing stuff that's A, it's alcohol, but B, it's also affecting me on a, gut level, which then affects everything.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like, and then I need to stop doing that. Okay, I'll go back to that. And then it was just like, hey, I need to, there's obvious change that needs to be made. And then just, it was weird because it was a committed decision, but it wasn't like this hard and fast rule that I put to myself. I was like, I'm just gonna go. There was no competition or no whatever. It was just, or no signing up for anything. And I think actually when I was reading your book, there's also that social media, and they have programs. Is it 1 year no beer?
Yeah.
So I was looking at that and I was like, I nearly bought the program. I'm like, do I really need to spend that much money to not drink? Like, it's kind of crazy. It was just seemed crazy to me that, hang on, no, I just need to not do it.
Right.
And that was that. So, there's all these little micro decisions along the way that allow me to keep going. But I absolutely agree with you. Like, this loose idea that I don't know if I will again or not is great, because I struggle with the idea of the 12-step program being that you have a problem and you have that problem for the rest of your life. That's putting a label on you, and it's like defining you as this broken person that's not necessarily broken at all. And I really struggle with that. And people could say, oh, you're not an addict. And I'm like, okay, maybe not. Maybe didn't make that necessary definition of it. But many things in this world are addictive. But if we label ourselves as that, we're going to be stuck with that label. And I think for you, mention it's all about freedom. Is there any freedom when we have a label attached to ourselves?
Yeah.
Ever?
Yeah.
So it's an interesting one.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, I would become more and more anti-label the more I move through life, because I just feel like every label is just a chance for somebody to have preconceived notions rather than get to know me, or for me to have preconceived judgments of myself, which is fascinating. So let me ask you the question that I sort of ask at the end of these things, which is, if you were going to go back in time and talk to Kristian of, just feeling like you're worried at night and regretful of things you did very, very long time ago and unable to sleep, and sort of tell him about what life is like now, what would you tell him?
Well, I like to see what can I improve always, but I look at it as like with being a parent to a 10-year-old who is now not growing up in a family of drinking, that doesn't see it as a normal everyday occurrence. And even he's now starting to ask more, have you ever been drunk? Have you done this? Have you done that? And then worrying that I have a boy that at some stage is going to happen. But talking back to the old Kristian and be going, well, the problem is that we can't change what happened yesterday. We can't even, everyone's like, oh, but you can win tomorrow. And you can only win tomorrow if you win today. So the only time now, and if I'm clear on today, mentally and physically, then I can do the things that are important today that will make the future brighter. And to not have that worry, which just sucks you of energy and doesn't make you feel good based on things that were done so many years ago, is kind of crazy. It's the worst. I don't know why we have that in humanity. It's horrible. It keeps us stuck. And but also, that in of itself, even though that is the outcome in my mind of alcohol, is that it's very easy to use alcohol as the excuse to keep dumbing it down. So, hey, if I drink, then I could sleep, even though the sleep is not going to be great, but then I don't have to deal with those demons. But if you just spend the time to get rid of the thing keeping you awake or making those demons, then, it goes away. So I don't know. I think the biggest part would be you're not missing out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe you are missing out by drinking.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
What
might you be missing out on? Yeah.
We need to play more, and we can't do that when we're drunk or intoxicated or hungover. So I think as adults we need to play more, like you mentioned that, laughing at your morning session. Like, we need to look at our kids and keep kids playing and play ourselves, instead of life being so serious. It is, serious, but it's also life. We've got to live it and enjoy it as well. Otherwise we're kind of not happy human beings, and that doesn't achieve anything.
Yeah, I love that. It's so good. Oh, wow. Well, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for coming on to share your story. It's been really fun to get to know you and hear all of your adventures and everything.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for writing the book, and being transparent and raw and doing the research to break down these myths. It's such a great book, and so well done that you can't fight it.
You can't unlearn. No, you can't see it differently.
Yeah.
Awesome. I love that so much. Well, it's just so good. Well, awesome, Kristian. We'll have a wonderful day.
You too. Thank you.
Hey, it's Annie Grace. I want to tell you about the most important book that I never wrote. And I mean that. This is This Naked Life. It's 48 true stories of people finding freedom from alcohol, and it's so inspiring. It's our stories, as you know from this podcast, that truly change us, that revolutionize what we believe is possible for ourselves. So it's This Naked Life. You can find it on Amazon or check it out online. Even download it 100% free at nakedlifestories.com. And every single copy that you buy, all the proceeds are 100% committed to keeping the alcohol experiment forever free for anybody who needs it. So check it out. It's such an inspirational book. And as always, rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast, as it truly helps the message reach somebody who might need to hear it today.